It just seems very familiar, and it seems to know who I am as well. It knows my soul, knows my dedication to trying to help people to understand what the crystal skulls are about, to share the best information, tell the best stories, answer questions, or we even do our own private sessions with our own skulls. And it's hard for me to believe, but since I received Portal de Luz in 1999, I'm sure I've done more than 1,000 sessions with people, over that time. And of course, I've had different people I've worked with, but now I work with my wife, Katrina. We do the sessions together.
Right. So how would that? So what you're saying is that from your perspective, that you feel like, maybe in a past life, how would you do? I mean, some people describe past lives as something. Some people describe life experiences as either, it's a very circular instead of, maybe it's a future event or something like that. Or are you speaking in that terms, or how would you define time whenever it comes to working with certain entities or crystals?
Okay, so when I say past life, it's relative to now.
Right.
Because the reality we live in is we think there's 3 dimensions for space and for time. That we can only move forward. We cannot move backward. We cannot move sideways. We have to move forward in time. The past is gone,
Right.
So this is the way we perceive time. I think from a spiritual perspective, which would be to a degree the dimension for which part of the essence of the crystal skull works on, that it works in a space where time and space are non-existent. Mm-hmm. So what that would mean from that perspective is that the past, present, and future is happening in the simultaneous now.
Right.
So that's a hard one to get around, because it means that if you have the ability, and I think I have this ability, where I could, like, for example, I believe I was a general in the Civil War. So if I focus my mind and I think about that, I start seeing in my mind's eye, like, some images, what it might have been like in movies I've seen and things like that. I can kind of tell, how accurate did they portray it. And I actually have gone to some of the battlefields that were fought, and where I still felt wandering souls and spirits that were there. And, so it's kind of like you're watching a movie in your mind. Is it my imagination? Am I making this up? Or could this actually be connected to another lifetime? So if on the level of spirit, time and space doesn't exist, it means all these other lifetimes are happening at the same moment. Right. So kind of like what happens is, let's say I had a past lifetime, and I believe this is true, as a priest in Atlantis working with crystal skulls.
Right.
And here I am in the modern time, and I'm working with crystal skulls. So between those 2 lifetimes, there are going to be things I'm going to be doing and things I'm going to be researching and looking at that's going to trigger memories from my past life to what I'm doing now. But I have to also understand that I, as the future me, could be affecting that person in Atlantis by sending them memories of what's happening in the modern time also.
Right.
So it kind of goes back and forth. And that doesn't even get into the concept which many scientists believe in, including we have a new computer now called a quantum computer, that there are parallel dimensions that have parallel Earths, which means there are parallel us's. In other words, there are other aspects of ourselves who are, basically maybe the same like we are now, same name, but making different choices in those parallel universes. So like, for example, in another parallel universe, maybe your wife contacts me and I say, there's no way I'm going to be on your radio show at that late hour, or something like that. Whereas this me says, no, I'll make time to do it because it's important to share this stuff. So, these are what I think is happening with time and space. And there was 2 times where I slipped, meaning I spaced out for a brief moment and I was aware that I was somewhere else. One time was where I was living in Chicago. I just remember looking outside, and it was like I saw, I don't know, how can you say it, like lights flash at me or something, like 100 lights flashing at me. And I knew I wasn't in the physical at that moment. And then in like 1 or 2 seconds, I came back. And then there was another time where I was in Brazil in a place called Alto Paraíso, which means high paradise. And this is a spot that the Brazilian people told me when a satellite goes over it, they see light shining from the ground because there's so much crystal in the ground in this area. And they also have an airport there that they claim UFOs have landed on there. So it has a very unusual, special energy. For a brief moment, I went into my future.
Right.
Like for about 2 seconds. I went in. I knew I was in Alto Paraíso in the future, and then all of a sudden I came back. So I think that what's starting to happen, like with the Mandela effect for people who are studying this, where, why do I remember the Field of Dreams movie, the major line that Kevin Costner hears in the field, if you build it, he will come.
Right.
But there are some people who say, no, if you build it, they will come. He will come refers to his father eventually coming at the end of the film. They will come refers to the 8 Chicago White Sox players that show up in the beginning. And I actually have a shirt I bought at the Field of Dreams baseball field that says, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
And it has a picture of the White Sox. So it's possible that what is starting to happen right now is that we're skipping around in timelines, that the different realities are interpenetrating each other for some reason.
Right.
So anyway, it's a hard concept to get around, but this is basically what I see that explains to me about the other side, where we go when we pass away, having multiple lifetimes, and having some aspect of our soul on maybe some higher dimension that's in touch with all aspects of our being, almost like a mini God, if you will.
Right.
Because this is the basic philosophy. All the religions say we are all one, meaning we are all one with Creator.
Right.
So
right.
So if that's true, if we're all one with Creator, this is very important for your listeners to remember this. Everything that happens to us, I believe, is about the experience. Okay, it's not about right or wrong, good or evil, making the right choice, making the wrong choice. It is about an experience, because from each experience we learn and we grow. But also, not only we grow, but Creator grows through us.
Right.
So even though someone might say, well, God, Creator, could think of every conceivable reality. Well, yeah, I think he can. He, she, I have to say, because it's not really just he. He, she can do that. But what he, she wants is the experience of every conceivable experience that exists. So it means all of us are absolutely perfect. We may look at ourselves and say, well, we got this thing we want to change and this thing we want to get better and so on. But from the eyes of Creator, I think that, we're all in perfection, and we're here to have an experience and make the best of life, even though we live on a crazy planet right now.
Yeah. I think you're right, Joshua, simply because of the fact that, a lot of times people will say to me, well, you've had some strange experiences in your life, Kevin, or whatever, or, I've had some tragedies and things like that. I don't know if it's on the same scale as a lot of people, but, I tend to try to make the most out of, my experiences to learn from it. And I found that, honestly, in a lot of ways, the negative experiences seem to actually impart more knowledge to me as far as changing things than just having everything go my way. In other words, I do learn from a lot of those different things. But it was interesting when you were talking about Alto Paraíso, because I wanted to that struck in my mind something where when I was a child, and I grew up in Ireland, and my great grandmother lived in Scotland, so I would always spend the summers in Scotland. But we lived well, she would always take me to this place, which is called Schiehallion. Schiehallion means mountain of the fairies, you see. And what was interesting about that is that it glows in the sun too because of all the quartz that's there, and so it looks like a diamond. But the thing that is actually interesting about that is that children, where the rumors were, or the folklore stories were, that children would go into the base of Schiehallion, into the caves down there, and then they would basically disappear for 24 hours and show up, miles and miles and miles away. So it does seem to me, from a certain standpoint, the experiences that I've had that have been very, very strange in my life seem to focus around geology that has a lot of quartz or those things in it. It's interesting. A lot of people say, well, they have strange experiences around gold mines or silver mines or something like that. Well, geologically speaking, if you have gold, you usually have a ton of quartz too. So that and I don't know if you've thought of this, but it seems like to me that the quartz may accentuate or experiences like that, and the skulls especially, because they've had so much time and energy put into making them. I mean, like the Mitchell Hedges skull, I know that's the one that's been sort of examined by all these different, IBM and those places, wasn't it? Who did they take it to? That
Hewlett-Packard.
Hewlett-Packard, yeah. And they said that they couldn't find tool marks on it or anything like that, as far as that goes. So, in order to do all that, if for example you're saying that somebody could make that, the amount of time it would have literally taken, I would think
thousands of hours,
multiple lifetimes to complete that.
Well, that used to be what they thought, but recently I know some carvers in China that are able to make a good approximation of it using diamond tip tools. So it is a skill. I mean, it's not something that just anybody can do. But here's the key. The Chinese carvers, for the TV show I was on from this British production company, they brought me to San Francisco, and they had one of these skulls made, and it had no energy in it at all, okay? Whereas, the Mitchell Hedges skull, when you're in the presence, I've seen people go into an altered state of consciousness, receive healing. Even myself, I was just taking people in and out of a session, and I became all of a sudden overcome with the tremendous amount of energy I need to have a healing. It was so powerful for me, and I thought I'd been around it before, that I had adapted to it. So it's not just the shape, it's not just the quality of the carving, it's the consciousness that's working through, the skull, the mineral, or whatever. Now, quartz crystal in particular, I call it a transmitter and receiver of different frequencies of vibrational energies. That's what it does. And another thing, Marcel Vogel, who was an IBM engineer that eventually got into making all kinds of incredible quartz crystals, even some that are more than six-sided, which I don't know how he did that. He was a genius. He felt that the bones in our body resonate completely with quartz. So if a person is holding a piece of quartz in their hand, it's linking into their entire bone structure, and it's going to give them an uplifting energy that they're going to feel.
Right.
So, and plus the fact, this doesn't even consider all of our modern electronics is using quartz crystals,
right?
Little crystals inside, because they're able to amplify the electrical current that go through it, and they're also able to simulate the binary function that's in the computer, the on and off switch that we need, which our computers are based on this binary function inside of it. So
right.
Quartz crystal has played a very important role in our society. All of our modern electronics